Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Brian Wong. He's the founder and CEO at Kiip, and he's also the author of The Cheat Code. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited to chat with you today, Brian. We're going to be talking about 3 cheats for successful B2B marketing. And a lot of these come straight from your book, which if you're listening to this and you have not already checked out The Cheat Code, make sure that you go ahead and do that. But before we jump into these cheats, Brian, I want to first have our listeners understand what you and your team are up to at Kiip.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, Kiip is a rewards platform in mobile apps. What does that actually mean? That means that we take what people are doing in their apps, let's say finishing a run on a running app or crossing off a to-do or leveling up in a game, just anything you might be doing on a daily basis. And then we pair those moments, is what we call them, we give it a name, to relevant brands and rewards from those brands. Then why we did this was because mobile advertising has really kind of hit this point where the user experience has largely not been paid attention to. People don't want to pay attention to mobile ads just because they're usually quite annoying. We said, why not take another route and do something that isn't advertising altogether, but rather rewards? And so that's kind of how we approach the problem, and this is how we're solving it.
I love it. So Brian, we're going to be talking about 3 cheats for successful B2B marketing. And the first one that we're going to dig into today is around email. Could you talk to us about this one?
Yeah. So to give a bit of context, so I originally came from Canada. I grew up in Vancouver, and I actually graduated college early. I skipped 4 grades, so I finished school when I was 18. Now, obviously, when you're very young and you're trying to make a name for yourself and you're trying to get somewhere, in this case, I figured I would want to live and work in Silicon Valley. Now, this was just a dream at the time, and I knew no one, right? And if you don't know anyone, a lot of people always self-defeat and go, oh, I don't know anyone. What can I do? And I'm like, well, you can actually just email them.
Yeah.
and it's not that hard because you can reach practically anyone on the planet who you'd want to sell to, that's the big asterisk, by guessing their email address. Now, a lot of people will go, why would they want to talk to me? They'll just ignore me. They'll think I'm spam. Obviously, there's certain tactics. So the quick tactics I'll go into, obviously, are just the guessing of the email in the first place, which is just generally speaking, it could be first.lastname@company.com. But in the BCC field, you put in every other combination you can think of. So first letter of their first name, dot last name at company.com, or like just infinite permutations. Just think of 4 or 5 very likely ones, put them in the BCC. When you send it, obviously the ones that didn't work will bounce back.
Yep.
And then the ones that did work, you'll go through.
Yep.
So that's one tactic.
Yep.
But how do you get them to pay attention to you? The email subject line should be as short as possible, but it should be kind of mysterious. I love the power of mystery. So something like when I was first reaching out, so this is the story. The story goes, we actually got an investment from American Express because of a cold email. And I cold emailed Ken Chanel, the CEO. And I was just, it's pretty easy to guess his email is kenneth.chanel@aexp.com.
Yeah.
And you in the subject line, I put in something along the lines. I don't exactly remember I put the email on my LinkedIn so people can read it. I think something like your mobile strategy needs work or something. And it was a little bit of a prod and saying that their mobile at the time wasn't that fantastic and let's talk about it. And he ended up introducing me to their head of mobile and then to their head of venture investing and then after that, obviously 6 months after that, the investment occurred. So that was one tactic. Body of the email, you also want to keep it as short as possible. What you don't want to do is vomit everything you want to tell the person in the body of the email, because if they just go no or they ignore you, then your whole play just fell through. Yep. So if you put little bits and you kind of follow up and have new information every single time you follow up, then you have the highest likelihood of getting a response. The angle of it too, obviously if you have a product to sell, try not to talk about that product too much. Try to talk about the problem that you're solving and why it's a big problem. And these are critical, very logical things to do, but sometimes people are so tempted to be like, well, my thing is amazing. No one cares about your thing at the beginning. They don't.
Yep.
You're one of 1,000 people. And so you just don't want to focus on that. And you want to offer yourself as someone who they can lean on as an expert. Most executives want to look good. And if they can get free intel from you and at the same time, eventually, maybe, possibly buy your product, that's the best relationship. And that's kind of how the email part obviously has helped a ton. So that's just like a little teaser. There's so much more. But definitely email is one of the most powerful things you can use.
Yeah. Have you found any, Brian, I use a tool called Mailshake, and so it allows me to, that's how we do a lot of the outreach for our podcast, is we find people that we think would be good fits. We use like Hunter to find their email address from LinkedIn, and then we get it loaded into this tool Mailshake, which kind of allows you to scale one-to-one email, if you will. Are there any tools like that you use to help enable email, or do you just kind of just one by one in kind of through Gmail or whatever provider you're using?
So I'll give you kind of two quick thoughts on that. The first is, there's nothing that replaces good old customized individual emails, high quality, sent by yourself through the Gmail server.
Yep.
That's who you would do the hard work to get to the people at the top. You wouldn't throw Ken's email into a CRM for this type of thing. It'd be very tough for him to pay attention and then to potentially reply.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some success with those types of CRM services. I mean, our team, we use a mixture of like everything from Streak to HubSpot to Salesforce IQ to you name it, right? Just a whole bunch of power tools. Again, varying levels of success, but I've seen the most successful are the combination of cold emailing, raw, sort of genuine, customized emails, and then LinkedIn actually. So just adding people on LinkedIn. Again, it also matters if you have a good LinkedIn profile, if you're Googleable. I mean, there's a lot of things I haven't mentioned here that are part of the book, but in general, if again, your name comes in, another tactic, this is also very valuable, is brand recognition of your name. So I'm not advocating that you spam this person. I'm advocating that you, over time, the seeds are set way before you actually reach out to them. You start doing things like liking their LinkedIn posts. You favorite their Twitter posts. You just start engaging with their social media, because what happens is they'll recognize your name and the notifications that come in through their phone. Most likely they're vain enough to want to keep those notifications on because they want to know how many people like their LinkedIn posts.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you email them, they'll go, wow, this name looks really familiar for some reason. They won't actually know where. They actually won't be able to put their finger on it, but it'll look familiar, and they will most likely pay attention to you because you had engaged with something before. And it works very, very well.
Yep. How many follow-ups have you found that it takes before you get a response from higher level folks?
Higher level folks, you kind of change your tactics every single time, right? So I'd say 2 follow-ups, and then you switch tactics. Then you switch tactics to things like trying to email someone that's close to them, or a VP, or messaging them on LinkedIn, or something different. But you keep a good time interval between them. Don't do like every day, because then it just starts to piss them off.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then usually after about, I don't know, honestly, you'll know if they're just ignoring you, because there's sometimes you can get read receipts. Sometimes those are false positives, like somehow there's a general inbox and everyone's checking it. But if you see your email being read 5 times and then disappears for a bit, it's usually because they forwarded the email and then no one replied to that forwarded email. So you can follow up in that case and be like, hey, not to be cheeky, but I noticed that you sent my email along to people on the team. And then they'll be like, yeah, sorry, they haven't gotten back to you yet, type of thing. So there's ways to figure it out.
Got it. All right. So this next cheat that we're going to be talking about, Brian, is making other people feel smart. Talk to us about this one.
Yeah. So too often we have products that we understand thoroughly, but when we explain it to people, it just actually has the opposite effect. It makes people feel dumb, right? Because you're talking to them with a super complicated DMP or some crazy CRM, and they're just like, what is this? And then they don't ever want to admit to you they don't understand. That's the other thing you'll notice about people is, well, the good ones will say, I don't understand, please repeat yourself. But that also makes you feel bad. So they don't want to do that either. So the best is to be as sort of enabling of their smarts, meaning, this is something that, we've learned. You use terms that are just vaguely, so the classic examples, instead of saying statistics, people have said machine learning now. It's the same thing. But it's just a different couple words. And then people think, oh, wow, machine learning sounds so fancy. A company that does this extremely well is Apple. I mean, look at Apple. Apple has a very tough challenge in selling sometimes very complex technologies. But they do it in a very elegant way that actually, just for example, the amount of time that Johnny Ive spends explaining to you how the metal is being made for the Apple Watch, you're just like, my mind is blown. But the metal has nothing to do with how functional the actual thing is.
Yeah.
But just by talking about it, you've felt very empowered from an information standpoint. So same thing goes with your product, talking about the story of how it was formed, why your founders came up with the idea. These things are all very endearing and are part of the components of helping someone understand why, and then eventually the what, which of course is the classic training that I'm sure most people who are listening already have, which is why and then what makes people feel extremely enabled, extremely smart. And then instead of saying things like, you may not know this, but I mean, just terminologies like that pisses people off because you're implying they don't know it.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't, but they don't want to be told that they don't know it.
Exactly.
You should be like, you probably know about this, but I'm just going to go through it anyways, is the best way to kind of frame something. And then, you'll notice if they really know it, because if you see you go through it, they'll just start to finish your sentences for you. Then you can skip to the next thing. But if they kind of not sit there and nod their head, then they're obviously not as versed on this stuff, and they just want to hear more, and you get a chance to share a bit more. So that's another way as well to get through.
All right, and this last one that we're going to talk about today, Brian, obviously there are a ton more in your book, the cheat code. But before I let you go today, I want to talk about this third one, which is reinvent or die. Talk to us about this one.
Yeah, it's a nod towards companies that have basically had the same product for a long time and don't seem to have evolved. Now, that's the trick. It isn't about did you actually evolve. It's that you didn't seem to have evolved. What happens when you have a stale product or what is perceived to be a stale product, is people just, again, assume that you are not innovating. And who wants to buy from a vendor that won't constantly be ahead of the curve, right? I mean, most of the people that are out there are tasked with innovation. In fact, if you think about it, that is one of the main job description mandates for a lot of B2B marketing type buyers, or even just executives that are trying to stay ahead of the curve and look good in front of their team. So when they pick a vendor who's been listed in some cool list, or has released a thought leadership piece or something that just shows that they're on top of it, is quite critical. I know it sucks. I know it's like, why do we need to talk about VR and AR just because everyone's talking about it? Why do we have to talk about AI just because everyone's talking about it? Unfortunately, you kind of do. And the reason is not because you're jumping on the bandwagon. It's actually you keeping your ear to the ground and explaining to the person maybe it's not relevant. So even just being able to tell them why it's not is actually more important than just not even talking about it at all. Because at least people know that you're on top of it. And it's not that hard, right? Like, I mean, everyone with half a brain who's listened to the news will know what is going on. It's just being able to tie that back to your line of business and why, it's like, no, we will never have VR, video conferencing because it makes you look like a goof. I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
Who knows? I could be very, very wrong. But those are the things that at least you can take a stance on. And here's the best part. Even if you're wrong, everyone's allowed to be wrong when it comes to predicting things because no one has a crystal ball. But again, makes you look authoritative enough to have made a stance and have sort of oriented your products and your services and your thought processes along with it.
I love it. Brian, this has been fantastic, man. If there's somebody listening to this and they want to stay connected with you, they want to learn more about Kiip, or they want to check out your book, what's the best way for them to go about doing all of those things?
The easiest is the URL for the book, which is thecheatcodebook.com. A little bit complicated, sorry. And I'm on Twitter at Brian_Wong, and then you can find me on LinkedIn just by searching my name.
Love it. Awesome, Brian. Well, thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been incredible. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you or someone you know would be an incredible guest for the B2B Growth Show, email me at jonathan@sweetfishmedia.com. Let us know. We love connecting with B2B executives, and we love sharing their wisdom and perspective with our audience.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.